Hey there, everyone. Let's kick things off with a question that might just get you thinking. Was Franklin Roosevelt a savior during the Great Depression or the architect of a dangerous government overreach? Stick around because we're diving deep into this debate. All right, so let's talk about Franklin D. Roosevelt, or FDR as we like to call him. He was the 32nd President of the United States, taking office during one of the toughest times in American history, the Great Depression. His presidency lasted from 1933 until his death in 1945, a period that also included World War II. FDR faced a series of unprecedented challenges, and his responses to these crises have left a lasting impact on the United States. But his legacy is a complex one. Some celebrate him as a hero who saved the country from economic collapse and led it to victory in World War II, while others criticize him for expanding the federal government's power and infringing on civil liberties. Today, we're going to dissect this legacy, looking at both the praise and the criticisms that have followed FDR throughout history. Let's start by examining the contrasting perspectives on Roosevelt's policies, particularly his New Deal programs. The New Deal was a series of federal initiatives launched by FDR in response to the economic devastation of the Great Depression. These programs aimed to provide relief for the unemployed, recovery of the economy, and reforms to prevent a future depression. For many, these programs were a lifeline. They created jobs, provided financial assistance, and restored hope to a nation that was on the brink of despair. However, the New Deal wasn't without its critics. Some argued that it represented an overreach of federal power and stifled the free market. Business leaders, in particular, were wary of the government's involvement in areas traditionally left to private enterprise. They feared that Roosevelt's policies were moving the country towards socialism and undermining the principles of capitalism. This debate over the role of government in the economy is still relevant today, as we continue to grapple with questions about how much intervention is necessary in times of crisis. Now let's delve into some of the specific policies and actions taken by Roosevelt, examining both their successes and the criticisms they garnered. One of the most famous programs of the New Deal was the Civilian Conservation Corps, CCC. The CCC was designed to tackle two pressing issues: unemployment and environmental degradation. It employed millions of young men in projects like planting trees, building flood barriers, and fighting forest fires. This not only provided immediate relief to those in need of work, but it also had long-term benefits for the country's infrastructure and natural resources. Another cornerstone of the New Deal was the Social Security Act of 1935. This was one of the first federal programs aimed at providing financial security for the elderly, the unemployed, and the disabled. Social Security became a crucial safety net for millions of Americans, and it remains one of the most enduring legacies of Roosevelt's presidency. But while these programs were groundbreaking, they weren't without controversy. Take, for example, the National Industrial Recovery Act, NIRA, which aimed to boost industrial production and improve labor conditions by setting standards for wages and prices. Critics argued that the NIRA gave the federal government too much control over businesses and created unnecessary bureaucracy. In 1935, the Supreme Court even ruled the act unconstitutional, stating that it granted the executive branch powers that were reserved for Congress. Beyond the economic policies, Roosevelt's presidency also raises questions about civil liberties. One of the most glaring examples is the internment of Japanese Americans during World War II. In 1942, following the attack on Pearl Harbor, Roosevelt signed Executive Order 9066, which authorized the forced relocation and incarceration of around 120,000 people of Japanese ancestry, most of whom were U.S. citizens. This decision, driven by wartime hysteria and racial prejudice, stripped thousands of their rights and freedoms, leading to years of hardship and loss. This internment policy is often considered one of the darkest chapters of Roosevelt's presidency. The fear of espionage and sabotage, combined with widespread racism, led to a policy that was not only unjust, but also unconstitutional. Families were uprooted from their homes, businesses were lost, and lives were disrupted, all without due process. The decision to intern Japanese Americans has since been widely condemned, and in 1988, the U.S. government formally apologized and provided reparations to the survivors. This moment really encapsulates the duality of Roosevelt's legacy. On one hand, he was a leader who took decisive action in the face of unprecedented challenges. He mobilized the country for war, led the Allies to victory, and laid the foundation for the post-war world order. On the other hand, his willingness to sacrifice civil liberties in the name of national security has left a stain on his record. It's also important to look at Roosevelt's broader impact on the role of the presidency and the federal government. Before FDR, the federal government played a much smaller role in the lives of everyday Americans. Roosevelt's New Deal significantly expanded the government's involvement in areas like social welfare, labor rights, and economic regulation. This shift marked the beginning of what some have called the modern presidency, where the president is expected to take an active role in shaping economic and social policy. Supporters of Roosevelt argue that these changes were necessary to address the scale of the crises he faced. The Great Depression was unlike anything the country had ever experienced, and it required bold, innovative solutions. FDR's willingness to experiment with new ideas and push the boundaries of government intervention helped to stabilize the economy and restore confidence in the American system. However, critics contend that Roosevelt's actions set a dangerous precedent. By expanding the power of the executive branch and increasing government intervention in the economy, they argue, Roosevelt paved the way for future presidents to overstep their bounds. This concern is particularly relevant today, as debates continue over the appropriate limits of executive power and the role of government in society. Roosevelt's leadership during World War II also deserves close examination. After the attack on Pearl Harbor, Roosevelt rallied the nation to join the war effort, leading the Allies in a fight against fascism. His ability to inspire and unite the American people was crucial in the face of such a global threat. The war brought about significant technological and economic changes, many of which were driven by Roosevelt's vision and leadership. Yet, even here, there are criticisms. Some historians argue that Roosevelt's foreign policies before the war were too cautious, delaying U.S. involvement at a critical time. Others point to the moral ambiguities of certain decisions, such as the alliance with Stalin's Soviet Union or the use of atomic bombs on Japan, which Roosevelt laid the groundwork for before his death in 1945. Despite these controversies, there's no denying that Roosevelt's presidency fundamentally reshaped the United States and the world. His New Deal programs transformed the relationship between the government and the American people, creating a social safety net that still exists today. His leadership during World War II helped to establish the U.S. as a global superpower and set the stage for the post-war order. So, as we sum it all up, it's clear that Franklin D. Roosevelt's legacy is a complex one. He was a leader who faced immense challenges and made decisions that changed the course of history. His New Deal policies provided much-needed relief during the Great Depression and laid the foundation for modern social welfare programs. His leadership during World War II was instrumental in securing Allied victory and shaping the post-war world. However, Roosevelt's legacy is also marred by controversial decisions, such as the internment of Japanese Americans and the expansion of executive power. These actions raise important questions about the balance between security and liberty and the role of government in society. Was Franklin Roosevelt a hero who rescued the nation from despair, or a villain who overstepped his bounds? The answer might just depend on who you ask. What's clear is that his impact on American history is profound and enduring, making him one of the most significant and debated figures of the 20th century. Now I want to hear from you. What do you think? Hero or villain? Drop your thoughts in the comments below, and if you enjoyed this deep dive into history, don't forget to check out my other videos where I explore more historical figures and events. Thanks for watching, and see you next time.